Commander Vex Morian stood in the control center of the Zelani defense station, watching the screens with growing fear. Red dots filled the display, each one representing a Korthek warship moving closer to their home worlds. 3 of their colonies were already gone. The reports from those places were too horrible to think about. The Korthek ships looked like living nightmares. They were part machine and part creature, feeding on the energy of destroyed planets. The biomechanical vessels moved through space like hungry predators, leaving nothing but death behind them. The Zelani had no defense against such monsters. Vex turned to his second-in-command, Officer Thyra Velion. Her blue feathers were ruffled with stress, and her large eyes showed the same fear he felt. The Zelani had ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years through peace and trade. They had never needed to fight a war. They did not even know how to fight a war. How many ships do they have now? Vex asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Our scouts report over 400 vessels in the main fleet, Thyra replied. They are moving through the Outer Rim territories like a plague. Each world they take makes them stronger. Vex closed his eyes and tried to think. The Zelani defense fleet had maybe 50 ships, and those were mostly built for patrol duties and rescue operations. They had some weapons, but nothing designed for real combat. Against 400 Korthek warships, they would last maybe an hour. What about the other species in our sector? He asked. Have any of them responded to our calls for help? Thyra shook her head sadly. The Myron Republic is evacuating their border worlds. The Altair Union has gone completely silent. Everyone is running or hiding. No one wants to fight the Korthek. The control room fell quiet, except for the soft beeping of computers. Outside the large windows, Vex could see their beautiful capital world of Zelora Prime. Cities of crystal and light spread across the continents below. Gardens and parks filled with colorful plants from dozens of worlds. Art galleries and schools where their children learned about music and science and philosophy. All of it would be destroyed within days unless something changed. Sir, called out Communications Officer Bex Talar from his station. I have an idea, but it might be crazy. Vex walked over to the young officer's workstation. Bex was barely past his first century, still new to military service. But young minds sometimes saw solutions that older ones missed. Tell me, Vex said. There are stories, Vex began slowly. Old tales from traders who travel to the far edges of known space. They speak of a species that lives on dangerous worlds. Deathworlds, they call them. The stories say these beings are natural fighters, born warriors who know nothing but conflict. Thyra made a sound of disgust. Fairy tales and trader gossip. We need real help, not myths. But Vex held up a hand. For silence. Continue, Vex. The ancient emergency beacon, the young officer said. It broadcasts on all frequencies across the entire galaxy. Every spacefaring species should receive it. If these warrior people exist, they would hear our call for help. Vex considered this. The emergency beacon was installed centuries ago, back when the Zelani first started exploring beyond their home system. It was designed to call for aid in the worst possible situations. This certainly qualified as the worst possible situation. The message would reach everyone, Vex said. Pirates, slavers, other hostile species. We could be calling more predators. To our doorstep. With respect, sir, Vex replied. We already have predators at our doorstep. The Korthek will kill or enslave every Zelani in the galaxy. What do we have to lose? Vex walked back to the main display and stared at those red dots. More appeared every few minutes as scouts reported new Korthek ships entering their territory. Soon there would be too many to count. The truth was painful but clear. The Zelani could not save themselves. Their peaceful nature had made them weak. In the face of pure evil, They had no choice but to beg for help from strangers and hope that someone out there still cared about protecting innocent life. "Activate the beacon," Vex ordered. Vex's fingers moved quickly across his control panel. "What should the message say, sir?" Vex thought for a moment. Peaceful civilization under attack by hostile force. Requesting immediate military assistance. Willing to negotiate any terms for aid. We are located in the Zelani sector Zelora Prime system. Please help us. The message was simple and desperate. It would broadcast across thousands of light years, reaching every corner of known space. Somewhere out there, maybe someone would listen. Maybe someone would care enough to help. "Message sent, sir," Bex reported, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Now came the hardest part. Waiting. The Korthic fleet was still days away from their core worlds, but not many days. If help was going to come, it needed to come soon. Light years away, near the edge of human space, Captain Jake Morrison was finishing his morning coffee on the bridge of the UES Valiant when the Nolly's communication officer called out, "Sir, we're receiving a distress signal on the emergency band. It's not from any human ship." Morrison set down his cup and walked over to the communication station, put it through. The translated message played through the ship's speakers. Morrison listened to the words of a desperate alien commander begging for help against an enemy that would destroy his entire species. "Plot a course for Earth," Morrison ordered, "maximum speed. And send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them we just received first contact with a species that needs our help." The Valiant turned toward home, carrying news that would change everything. In the depths of space, an ancient signal continued to broadcast. The Zelani had made their choice. They had called for help from the unknown darkness between the stars. They had no idea that their call had been answered by the one species in the galaxy that truly understood war. 3 days after the emergency beacon was sent, space above Zelora Prime began to shimmer. Commander Vex Morian watched from the defense station as something massive was coming out of hyperspace. The Zelani had expected maybe a few rescue ships, perhaps some traders willing to help for payment. What they got instead made their blood turn cold. The first ship to appear was bigger than anything in the Zelani fleet. Its dark hull was covered with weapon ports and armor plating. Strange symbols were painted on its side in white letters that read, "U.E.'s Leviathan." More ships followed, each one looking like it was built for nothing but war. 12 heavy cruisers emerged from hyperspace, their hulls bristling with guns. 8 smaller ships that moved like hunting animals took positions around the larger vessels. Every ship was painted in dark colors with sharp angles that seemed designed to inspire fear. The Zelani had never seen anything so terrifying and beautiful at the same time. "Sir," Officer Thera called out, her voice shaking. "The lead ship is requesting permission to dock. They say they are from something called the United Earth Systems, and they received our distress call." Vex stared at the alien fleet. These humans had brought enough firepower to destroy his entire world, but they were asking permission to dock. That had to be a good sign. He hoped. "Grant them permission," he said, "and prepare the main conference room. It looks like we are about to make first contact with a species that knows how to fight." 2 hours later, Vex found himself standing in the conference room with the other members of the High Council. They were wearing their finest ceremonial robes and had activated the translation devices that would let them speak with the aliens. The Zelani expected long diplomatic talks about trade agreements and mutual defense treaties. The door opened and the humans entered. They wore identical gray uniforms with various patches and symbols. Their leader was a woman with short dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from commanding powerful forces. Behind her came other officers, each one looking like they had seen real combat. I am Admiral Lisa Kane of the United Earth Systems Fleet, the woman said. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that made everyone in the room pay attention. We received your distress call and came as quickly as possible. Council Speaker Thyra Velion stepped forward and bowed in the traditional Zelani greeting. Welcome to Zelora Prime, Admiral Kane. We are grateful that you answered our call for help. I am Council Speaker Thyra Velion, and this is Commander Vex Morian of our defense fleet. Admiral Kane nodded, but did not bow. Instead, she activated a device that projected a three-dimensional map in the center of the room. The map showed the entire Zelani sector, with red markers indicating Korthic fleet positions. We have been monitoring the situation since we received your message, Kane said. Our intelligence shows that you are facing a force of approximately 430 enemy vessels. They have already conquered 3 of your colony worlds and are advancing on your core systems. The Zelani council members looked at each other nervously. The humans had learned more about their situation in 3 days than the Zelani had discovered in weeks of scouting. Yes, Thyra said carefully. The Korthic are a terrible enemy. We hoped that perhaps you could provide some defensive support while we attempt to negotiate with them. Your ships could help us evacuate civilians while we try to find a peaceful solution. The humans looked at each other with expressions the Zelani could not read. Admiral Kane studied the holographic display for a moment before speaking. Council. Speaker, she said slowly, the Korthic do not negotiate. Our analysis of their behavior pattern shows they are a predator species that consumes other civilizations for resources. They have no interest in peace talks or treaties. They want to destroy or enslave your entire species. Commander Vex felt his heart sink. He had hoped the aliens were wrong, but deep down he knew they were speaking the truth. What do you suggest? He asked. Admiral Kane touched the display, and it changed to show the human fleet positions. Your people called for help, and Earth has answered. But you need to understand something about humans. We do not fight defensive wars. We fight to win completely. Captain Jake Morrison, who had been standing quietly behind the Admiral, stepped forward. Commander Morian, I have been assigned as your liaison officer. My job is to help coordinate our forces with yours and teach your people what they need to know about military operations. Vex looked at the human officer. Morrison appeared younger than Kane, but had the same confident bearing. His uniform showed patches that probably indicated combat experience, though Vex did not understand their meaning. What kind of military operations? Vex asked. Morrison activated another display that showed tactical formations and attack patterns. The Korthic have been successful because they fight species that think defensively. They attack, you fall back. They advance, you retreat. This continues until you have no more room to retreat. That is how civilized beings conduct warfare, Thyra said with some irritation. You minimize casualties and seek diplomatic solutions. That works when both sides want to minimize casualties, Kane replied. But the Korthic are not civilized. By your standards, they are an infection that spreads through the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. The only way to stop an infection is to destroy it completely. The room fell silent as the Zelani tried to process what they were hearing. These humans spoke of war the way the Zelani spoke of art or science. It was clearly something they understood deeply and practiced regularly. How many wars has your species fought? Vex asked quietly. Kane and Morrison exchanged a look. Commander, Kane said, humans have been fighting wars for our entire recorded history. We have fought each other. We have fought our environment. And we have fought to survive on a world that tried to kill us every day. War is not something we choose to do. It is something we have learned to do very well because our survival has always depended on it. Morrison pulled up another display showing human military doctrine. We will teach your people what they need to know. How to coordinate fleet movements, how to use weapons effectively, how to think like predators instead of prey. But understand, once we begin fighting the Korthik, there will be no going back to the old way of doing things. Vex looked around the room at his fellow council members. They were peaceful beings who had never imagined they would need to learn about warfare. But the alternative was extinction. What do you need from us? He asked. Admiral Kane smiled for the first time since entering the room. It was not a gentle smile. Everything. Your ships, your crews, your resources, and your complete trust. The Korthik think they are the most dangerous predators in this galaxy. We are going to teach them that they are wrong. Outside the station, the human fleet maintained its positions around Zelora Proem. The ships looked like sleeping dragons, beautiful and terrible, and ready to breathe fire across the stars. The Zelani had called for help, and help had arrived. But they were beginning to realize that their rescuers might be more dangerous than their enemies. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Hughes Valiant, watching the tactical display with Commander Vex Morian beside him. The Zelani officer was trying to understand the human battle plan, but his peaceful nature made it difficult to think like a predator. The Korthik scouts are in the Kelleris system, Morrison explained, pointing to the red dots on the screen. 12 ships, probably gathering information about our defenses. Standard Zelani doctrine would be to pull back and prepare defensive. Positions. Vex nodded. Yes, that makes sense. We should protect our civilians and make the enemy come to us where we have advantages. Morrison shook his head. That is exactly what they expect you to do. The Korthik have conquered dozens of species using the same pattern. They probe your defenses. You fall back, they advance, you retreat. Eventually, you run out of room to retreat. Then, what do you suggest? Vex asked. Morrison smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made Vex nervous. We attack them first. Hard, fast, and with overwhelming force. We hit them before they know what is happening. Admiral Kane's voice came over. The communication system. All ships, this is Leviathan. Execute Operation Hammer Strike. Repeat, execute Hammer Strike. The human fleet began moving with a precision that amazed Vex. Every ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. They had practiced this type of attack so many times that it was like watching a deadly dance. Jumping to hyperspace in 3, 2, 1, announced the navigation officer. Space twisted around them as the human fleet entered hyperspace. Vex felt his stomach turn as reality bent and folded. The Zelani had hyperspace technology, but it was much gentler than this violent method the humans used. Seconds later, they dropped back into normal space directly in the middle of the Korthik scout formation. The enemy ships were spread out in a loose patrol pattern, not expecting any attack. They had been hunting prey species for so long that they forgot what it felt like to be hunted. All weapons, fire at will, Morrison ordered. The space around them lit up with weapons fire. Human plasma cannons sent streams of superheated energy into the biomechanical Korthik ships. Missile launchers fired salvos of smart weapons that tracked their targets with deadly accuracy. Point defense systems created walls of laser fire that destroyed anything trying to get close. Vex watched in shock as the humans tore apart the enemy fleet with surgical precision. Each human ship seemed to know exactly which target to hit and when to hit it. They moved like a pack of hunters, coordinating their attacks to maximize damage while protecting each other. The Korthik ships tried to fight back, but they were completely unprepared for this type of assault. Their biomechanical hulls could regenerate from small amounts of damage, but the humans were not giving them small amounts of damage. They were hitting each ship with enough firepower to vaporize asteroids. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cooper was leading the destroyer squadron in a flanking attack that cut off the Korthik escape route. His ships moved like sharks through space, their weapons turning enemy vessels into expanding clouds of debris and biomatter. "Target the command ship," Cooper ordered his gunner. "Hit it with everything we have." The lead Korthik vessel was larger than the others, its hull covered with sensor arrays and communication equipment. It was trying to coordinate the defense and call for reinforcements. The human destroyers focused all their firepower on this single target. The biomechanical ship screamed as it died. The sound came through space itself as the living parts of the vessel felt pain and terror. Vex had never heard anything so horrible in his life. The humans showed no emotion as they continued their systematic destruction of the enemy fleet. Dr. Elena Vasquez was monitoring the battle from the science station on the Leviathan. She was recording everything about the Korthik ships, studying their biomechanical systems and looking for weaknesses. Her clinical approach to studying the enemy disturbed even some of the human crew members. "Interesting," she said as she watched a damaged Korthik ship trying to regenerate its hull. "The biological components are trying to seal the breaches, but they cannot handle this level of damage. Their healing factor has limits." Admiral Kane studied the tactical display with satisfaction. "Note that weakness, Doctor. We can use it in future engagements." The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes and 34 seconds. When the weapons fire stopped, 12 Korthik ships were floating dead in space. The human fleet had suffered only minor damage to 2 destroyers, and even that was already being repaired by automated systems. Vex stared at the destruction with a mixture of awe and horror. The humans had annihilated an entire enemy fleet with the same efficiency that the Zelani used to organize trade convoys. War was clearly something they understood at a level his peaceful species could barely imagine. "Captain Morrison," he said quietly, "how did your people learn to fight like this?" Morrison was reviewing damage reports, but he looked up at the Zelani commander. "We learned because we had to. Our home world tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, ice ages, asteroid impacts. Everything on Earth wanted humans dead, so we became very good at killing things before they could kill us." "And then you started fighting each other," Vex observed. "Yes," Morrison admitted. "We fought wars over territory, resources, ideas, religion. We have been perfecting the art of warfare for thousands of years. We do not enjoy it, but we are very good at it." Admiral Kane's voice came over the communication system again. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump. We are going to send a message to the main Korthik fleet." "What kind of message?" Vex asked. Morrison smiled that dangerous smile again. "The kind of message that predators understand. We are going to tell them that they are no longer the most dangerous species in this part of the galaxy." The human fleet jumped back to hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of the Korthik scout force. Floating among the debris were small transmitter devices that would broadcast everything that had happened to any Korthik ships that came to investigate. The message was simple and clear. The humans had entered the war, and they played by very different rules. The Korthik had spent their existence hunting prey species that ran away or hid behind defenses. Now they were about to learn what it felt like to be hunted by something that hunted back. Vex looked at the tactical recordings of the battle and tried to understand what he had witnessed. The humans had not just won a military engagement. They had demonstrated a form of warfare that was both terrifying and beautiful in its efficiency. His people had called for help, and help had arrived. But Vex was beginning to realize that the cure might be more dangerous than the disease. The Korthik response came faster than anyone expected. Within 2 days of the battle at Kelleris, long-range sensors detected a massive fleet moving toward Zelani space. The biomechanical ships were coming in numbers that made Commander Vex's Blood run cold. How many? Admiral Kane asked from the command center of the Leviathan. Our scouts count over 600 vessels, reported Captain Morrison. The main Korthic battle fleet, plus reinforcements from their conquered territories. They are bringing everything they have. Vex studied the tactical display with growing fear. The red dots representing enemy ships covered half the screen. Even with human help, the odds seemed impossible. They must be very angry about what happened. To their scouts, Kane smiled grimly. Good. Angry enemies make mistakes. But we need more ships if we are going to face that many Korthic vessels. The Admiral activated her communication system and sent a priority message to Earth. The response came back within hours. Admiral Kane read the reply, and her smile grew wider. Reinforcements are coming, she announced. The second and third fleets are already in hyperspace. They will be here in 4 days. When the human reinforcements arrived, even Vex was impressed. Over 200 additional warships dropped out of hyperspace, including vessels he had never seen before. The largest ship was so massive that it blocked out stars when it passed in front of them. That is the Use Ragnarok, Morrison explained, as they watched the giant vessel take position at the center of the fleet. It is what we call a dreadnought. Mobile command center, weapons platform, and fortress all in one package. With the dreadnought came someone new. General Patricia Hayes materialized on the bridge via hologram, her image transmitted from the Ragnarok's command center. She was an older woman with gray hair and scars on her hands that suggested a long military career. Admiral Kane, Hayes, sighed, I am taking command of all ground operations. My Marines are ready for boarding actions and planetary assault if needed. Vex had no idea what boarding actions meant, but it sounded dangerous. General Hayes, we hope this conflict can be resolved without ground combat, our civilians. Hayes looked at the Zelani commander with eyes that had seen too many wars. Commander, the Korthic do not take prisoners. They consume entire populations. If we do not stop them in space, there will be no civilians left to protect. The final battle was planned for the Nexus system, a strategic location that controlled access to the core Zelani worlds. The humans had spent days preparing the area, placing weapons platforms and sensor networks throughout the system. When the Korthic arrived, they would find themselves in a carefully designed trap. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been working around the clock, studying the captured Korthic biotechnology. Her research had revealed disturbing secrets about the enemy ships. They were not just machines with biological components. They were living creatures bred specifically for war and conquest. The neural networks in their hulls process pain and fear, she explained to the command staff. They actually enjoy destroying other life forms. Fighting them is not just a military action. It is pest control. Morrison found himself commanding a mixed squadron of human destroyers and Zelani support ships, teaching the peaceful aliens how to fight was harder than he expected, but they were learning quickly when their survival depended on it. Remember, he told Commander Vex over the communication link, your sensors are better than ours. You find the targets, we destroy them. Stay behind our heavy ships and coordinate your fire with ours. The Korthic fleet arrived at the Nexus system like a plague of locusts. Their biomechanical ships moved in organic patterns that seemed almost alive. The lead vessels were larger than before, covered with additional weapons and organic armor that pulsed like a heartbeat. Admiral Kane studied the enemy formation from the Ragnarok's command center. The Korthic had learned from their previous defeat and were approaching more carefully. But they were still thinking like predators hunting prey. They had no experience fighting other predators. All ships execute anvil formation, Kane ordered. Let them come to us. The human fleet spread out across the system in a pattern that looked random, but was actually carefully planned. Each ship knew exactly where to be and when to move. The Korthik saw what appeared to be a defensive formation and moved to attack with confidence. The battle began when the first Korthik ships entered weapons range. The biomechanical vessels opened fire with energy weapons that could melt through standard armor. But the humans had studied these weapons and developed new shielding that absorbed and redirected the energy attacks. Human return fire was devastating. Plasma cannons and particle beams tore through Korthik hulls faster than their biological systems could regenerate. The enemy ships screamed in pain as they died, their living components feeling every hit. Captain Morrison led his mixed squadron in a flanking attack that caught a group of Korthik cruisers by surprise. The Zilani ships provided targeting data while the human destroyers delivered the killing blows. It was the first time the peaceful aliens had participated in the systematic destruction of enemy vessels. "Target the command ship," Morrison ordered. "Vex, lock your sensors on that big one in the center." Commander Vex felt sick as he watched the battle, but he did his job. His people's survival depended on learning to think like killers, at least for today. The Zilani sensor array painted the target, and human weapons turned it into burning debris. The battle raged for 6 hours across the entire star system. Human tactical doctrine turned the enemy's aggression against them, using their own attack. Patterns to lead them into kill zones where concentrated firepower could destroy multiple ships at once. General Hayes watched the battle from the Ragnarok and prepared her Marines for boarding operations against damaged enemy vessels. Her soldiers were equipped with weapons designed specifically for fighting in the cramped corridors of biomechanical ships. "If any of those things try to run," she told her troops, "we board them and make sure they never threaten innocent people." Again, when the weapons fire finally stopped, space around the Nexus system was filled with the remains of the Korthik battle fleet. Over 400 enemy ships had been destroyed or disabled. The few survivors were fleeing back toward the Galactic Rim, carrying news of their defeat to whatever remained of their empire. The human fleet had lost 18 ships and suffered damage to many others, but they had achieved complete victory. The Korthik threat to Zilani space was ended. Vex sat in his command chair and stared at the tactical display. The red dots representing enemy ships were gone, replaced by the green icons of human and Zilani vessels. His people were safe, but at a cost he was only beginning to understand. The Zilani had learned how to fight a war. More importantly, they had learned that sometimes peace could only be protected by those willing to wage war with absolute ruthlessness. It was a lesson that would change their civilization forever. 3 weeks after the battle at Nexus, Commander Vex Morian stood in the same control center where he had first sent the desperate call for help. The screens now showed peaceful green dots representing patrol ships and supply vessels. The red markers of enemy fleets were gone, but Vex did not feel the relief he had expected. The war was over, but everything had changed. Admiral Kane entered the control room wearing her dress uniform instead of battle gear. She was preparing for the formal ceremony that would create a permanent alliance between Earth and the Zilani Confederation. The treaty documents were already prepared, but Vex wondered if his people truly understood what they were agreeing to. "Commander," Kane said, "your defense fleet has performed admirably. The crews who fought with us at Nexus showed real courage." Vex nodded, but did not smile. "They learned quickly when their lives depended on it. But I am not sure they will ever be the same. We were a peaceful people for 3,000 years. Now we know how to kill." Kane studied the Zilani officer with understanding eyes. She had seen this before in other species that were forced to learn about warfare. "The galaxy is not always a peaceful place, Commander. Sometimes good people have to do terrible things to protect what they love." Captain Morrison approached them carrying a datapad with casualty reports. The numbers were smaller than they could have been, but every loss was felt deeply by both species. Human military doctrine emphasized minimizing friendly casualties. But war always had a price. The final count is 18 human ships lost and 43 Zelani vessels damaged or destroyed, Morrison reported. But over 50 million Zelani civilians are alive today because of what we did. I think that makes the cost worthwhile. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined them, her research into Corthic biotechnology finally complete. Her discoveries had led to new medical treatments and defensive systems, but also to weapons that made even veteran human soldiers uncomfortable. The line between defense and offense had become blurred in ways that troubled everyone involved. The biotechnology we captured will advance both our civilizations by decades, Vasquez said. But we must be careful how we use it. The Corthic created living weapons that felt pain and enjoyed causing suffering. We must not become like them in our efforts to defend against them. Council Speaker Thyra Velione arrived for the treaty ceremony looking older than she had just a month ago. The elegant Zelani leader had been forced to make decisions about warfare and military strategy that went against everything her peaceful culture believed in. But she had made those decisions because the alternative was extinction. Admiral Kane, Thyra said formally, the High Council has approved the Mutual Defense Treaty between our species. We understand that this alliance comes with responsibilities as well as benefits. Kane nodded respectfully. Earth will help train your defense forces and provide military advisors. In return, Zelani sensor technology and scientific knowledge will help us protect other peaceful species who might face similar threats. The ceremony was held in the Great Assembly Hall of Zelora Prime, with representatives from both species present. As Kane and Thyra signed the treaty documents, everyone understood that they were witnessing a historic moment. The galaxy now had a formal alliance between a warrior species and a peaceful civilization. But Vex found himself thinking about the cost of that alliance. Young Zelani officers were already being sent to Earth for military training. They would return knowing how to plan attacks, coordinate fire missions, and think like predators. The peaceful nature of his species was being deliberately changed to meet the realities of a dangerous galaxy. General Hayes stood at attention during the ceremony, but her mind was on the reports coming in from the galactic rim. The surviving Corthic ships had spread word of their defeat, and other aggressive species were taking notice. Some were reconsidering their own expansion plans, while others were forming alliances to face the new human threat. This is just the beginning, Hayes told Morrison quietly. Word is spreading about what happened here. Every predator species in the galaxy now knows that humans exist and that we protect peaceful civilizations. Some will be deterred, but others will see us as a challenge to overcome. Morrison understood the implications. So we will need to be ready for more conflicts like this one. Yes, Hayes replied. The Zelani called for help, and we answered. But there are probably other species out there facing the same choice right now. Do they call for help and risk discovering that their rescuers might be more dangerous than they are? Enemies, or do they face extinction alone? After the ceremony, Vex walked through the streets of his capital city. The crystal buildings still sparkled in the sunlight, and the gardens were still filled with beautiful plants from dozens of worlds. Children still played in the parks and learned about art and music in their schools. But now there were also military academies where young Zelani learned about tactics and weapons. The city looked the same, but it felt different. There was a new awareness among his people that peace was not guaranteed. It had to be protected by those willing to fight for it. Some Zelani embraced this new reality, while others mourned the loss of their innocent age. Near the spaceport, Vex could see human ships preparing to leave. Most of the fleet would return to Earth, leaving behind only a small garrison and training cadre. Admiral Kane had promised that help would always be available if needed, But the Zelani were expected to take responsibility for their own defense from now on. As the sun set over Zelora Prime, Vex received a communication from the edge of the system. Captain Morrison was aboard the Valiant, preparing for the jump to hyperspace that would take him home to Earth. "Commander," Morrison said over the communication link, "it has been an honor serving with your people. You have learned difficult lessons, but you learned them well. The galaxy is safer because the Zelani now know how to protect themselves and others." Vex thought about that for a moment. "Captain, do you think we made the right choice? Calling for help instead of trying to find a peaceful solution?" Morrison was quiet for several seconds before answering. "Commander, there was no peaceful solution. The Korthik wanted to destroy your entire species. Sometimes the only way to save innocent lives is to be willing to take guilty ones. It is not pleasant, but it is necessary." As the human ships jumped to hyperspace and disappeared among the stars, Vex realized that his people had gained more than just military protection. They had gained membership in a larger community of species that looked out for each other. The price was the loss of their innocent belief that the universe was fundamentally peaceful, but the reward was the survival of their civilization. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, other species might be facing the same choice the Zelani had made. They could call for help and risk discovering that their saviors were more dangerous than their enemies, or they could face extinction alone. For humanity, it was a responsibility they were prepared to bear, because sometimes the greatest act of mercy was the willingness to be merciless toward those who threatened the innocent. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but it was a little safer now that someone was watching over the peaceful species who just wanted to live their lives without fear. The war was over, but the watch had just begun.